Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Art and White podcast. And we are excited for this episode. And we have a special guest for you today. And we know that we have heard that there is different seasons of life you're curious about. And the season of life that we want to talk about today is being an empty nester. So I want to welcome here my co-host Dee and Tiffany, and then our special guest today, Jan Kingan. And Jan Kingan, I've known her for, probably going on 8 years or so now, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but I have seen her in her life walk in this season, and she's a super inspiration. She has an amazing husband, Al, and 3 amazing children, Adam, Katie, and Madeline. And it's been a joy to see her walk in her life as her children have kind of flown the nest, and just seeing her walk through those seasons. And so, Jan, I'm so excited you're here. And our goal is to really help other women in different seasons of life, disciple them, help them walk through life in a way that pleases God. And I know you've done that. I've seen you do it. And so we're glad you're here. Thank you for coming with us today. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and your life here with us.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I do indeed have 3 grown-up children and a couple of granddaughters and a grandson on the way. Very excited about that. I did, in fact, have a career at one point until our 3rd one was born. And then I did like a bunch of part-time consulting work, but I haven't really worked full-time since 1994. But I've also had the opportunity to use the skills that I have to do like a lot of things for free. I have edited books. I have helped people with their resumes and cover letters. I've planned events. I have written skits and produced them for various church functions. And those are the kind of things that bring me joy, and that is my passion.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You are super creative, and I really enjoy that about you. So let's kind of dive in to some of the questions that we've gotten here about this season of life. And so let's start kind of with the spiritual. And I'd love to know, how has your time in the Word and your relationship with Jesus changed as you've entered the season of empty nesting and your kids have gone?
That was probably the hardest question of the ones that you sent me ahead of time to think about. And I'm not sure I have a great answer because I think empty nesting is maybe a misnomer for my particular situation. But I'd say that the way that my relationship has changed, it isn't really as much due to the season as the length of time that I have been a follower of Jesus. And so that I'm kind of at a place where I've been exploring the earlier parts of my faith, and why do I do what I do, and what is Jesus really calling me to, and in particular, what is Jesus calling me to in a season where we don't have kids at home and we still want to serve, but we're also getting older and our bodies are telling us that sometimes. So I would say that it's just really changed my perspective, and I feel like I can go deeper. And then I kind of argue with people about some things, but we have some pretty spirited discussions, which is great. And I feel like I can have those kind of relationships with my friends. Like, we don't just say, "How are you?" We can sit down and really talk about our relationships with Jesus.
Yeah, that makes me want to ask a question. Do you think that's the confidence of having walked with Jesus for so long, or that shift of being able to kind of dig deeper? Where has that come from, or can you explain that a little bit? I'm curious.
I think part of it has come with age. Honestly, I could kind of backtrack and think I became a follower of Jesus when I was 30, and at each like decade I can think of things that were different and sort of gave me more confidence in who I am as God's daughter, and like I, that has gotten more and more. And after I pass 60, I feel like I have a lot of wisdom, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. I don't think I people are like, would you like to go back and be like young spring chicken? And honestly, no, because I feel like I've gained that kind of wisdom. Did that answer your question? I'm not really sure it did.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really great. So, what about the transition in your marriage? Do you feel like um, what changed in your marriage as the kids were gone? Was there a major shift that happened or not? Or what was that like for you?
Well, as you know, they did leave, but then they kept coming back. So that's why I'm not sure empty nester is like a full enough term for that. We are all in the sandwich generation, as you know, and so there's still a lot of care. And the times when they do move back in, they move back in as adults. And so I don't know that there was a major shift in my marriage because we had, I don't want to say we prepared for it specifically for when they would go, for when they would move out and, launch or whatever. But I think that especially once we became followers of Jesus, I think we realized that our kids will go, but we will stay. And so that underlying relationship has sort of been the foundation of our household. And we had given it as much as we could. We give it time, we give it purpose, and we give it intention.
I love that because my husband and I, we came to that same realization about, I think when the girls started hitting their teens, we were like, oh,
Mm.
you know what? They're going to leave us one day and it's just going to be you and I left. And so that's when we really stopped. And I also think they also become more independent. So you allow yourself to put more energy into your relationship because they're not as dependent on you. But now we're in the space where I have a 19-year-old who is trying to leave the nest, but like you say, they come back. And so, how would, for those who didn't decide to make that a very intentional priority in the relationship, would you suggest, even though you did, to start making that a priority once the kids have left or are trying to leave the nest?
I suppose if you never recognized it before, or if you never gave it importance before, you should definitely when they leave the nest. Um, and I think if you haven't done it before, that you you might be good to like sit down with some other couples who are sort of in the same place, but maybe have been able to like build the foundation of marriage and find out how they did it, and like go try to do that sort of like, I my the thing one thing that I learned from my parents is that you should marry your best friend, or you should be friends with the person that you marry. And I think the people that I've seen who haven't transitioned as well to empty nesting are people who haven't really developed their friendship throughout their marriage. But it's never too late to do that, especially if you like the person. If you're like, hey, I remember why I married this person. But it could take help. You could need some counseling, but not in a sort of like fix us kind of way, but more in a like guide us through this time and help us to focus on a thing that we haven't known how to focus on in the past. So you might need help.
What ways have you been intentional in your friendship with your husband? Maybe you could give some practicals of what that's looked like.
When our kids were younger, we did try to be intentional about having time for ourselves, like taking dates or taking even some overnights and that sort of thing. And we used to have, we kind of still do. We used to have like these dates where we'd specifically sit down and talk about what we wanted for our kids, like where we saw our kids going next and how we were going to parent that through that together. Um, and then sometimes we sit down, we have like a budget date, but we do it like at a restaurant, so it doesn't seem so intimidating. You're like, here are all the bills that are due. sometimes we've had planning dates about the ministry that we're in and where we'd like to see it go and what we'd like to like pray about or study out. Or and then sometimes, honestly, we both really love traveling and we travel together really, really well. So sometimes we sit down and we go like, where do we want to go next, and make a plan. So taking time, and you don't have to, not everybody has the means to like go out and do it. Sometimes we've found ways to do it really cheaply, and sometimes we've had to do it like on our back porch. So it doesn't have to be like a big thing, but we go into it with intention. So spending time. And also we we have an ongoing backgammon match, like killer backgammon, since like 1983, maybe. We haven't kept score that long, but we do backgammon wherever we go. We just like take it along. And sometimes we joke and we say, oh, we've run out of things to say, we should play backgammon. But really, we just really enjoy each other's company, and we really enjoy beating each other at backgammon. So
I love that. I think that's so funny because like me and my husband sometimes we're like, okay, we work out together. Like, what else do we do together? And so for us, it would be Uno. We've been playing Uno since we were friends in
nice.
college. And so that's easy to just bring our little Uno cards wherever we go. But I love that you guys have something competitive and as well
Mhm.
as just something like a go-to just when you run out of things to say. That's awesome.
And Jan, I also liked when you talked about the intentionality in your relationship and the types of dates you have, right? Because most of the time, when you go on a date, you think that it's supposed to be kind of like this frou-frou thing, right? Like you're supposed to have fun, and that's good too. But when you have a date, and like you said, you talk about your budget and you talk about where do we want to see our children go in this next season and how we're going to parent them, then you get those in-depth conversations. And I think at the same time, that also builds intimacy between the two of you. I like that. I really like that, the way your dates looked.
Thank you. We even before we realized we were intentional, we actually had naming dates when we were having our kids. We would like we would each write a long list, and then we would go to whatever restaurant we could afford at the time, and we would line up like the salt and pepper shakers and all the things across so you couldn't see the other guy's list. And then we would have a double elimination to figure out what we were going to call our kids.
That is a lot of fun. That is a lot of fun. So what is do you think has been the biggest challenge for you with, I know the kids are still coming back, right?
Yeah.
But what has been the biggest challenge for you as you've gone into this season of, quote, empty nesting, unquote?
I think that it has to do with one of your other questions about what's my relationship with my kids now that they're adults. Transitioning to, it wasn't as hard to transition into the you don't have a curfew, you're a grown up, get a job. That part wasn't that hard, but like thinking about things that I wish I had done differently as a parent, and recognizing that I needed to really let go of a lot of that, and to not feel like I was the one who had to fix things between each of us or between them. And I actually had some really good Christian counseling about that helped me get that in perspective a lot. So yeah, figuring out like how to, because I'm honest, not all my kids get along with each other. And sometimes I feel like I'm in the middle and I want to fix it, but that's not really my job anymore. And it's also not my responsibility. So stepping away from that and feeling less burdened by the feeling of the responsibility. And then I enjoy spending time with my kids one-on-one. They're all incredibly different. And so the things we do are different. The things we talk about are different. So just like doing fun, cool things together.
Can I ask you if we could glean something from your Christian counseling? Because with my 19-year-old, that is something that I really struggled with. And the Lord just met me like, she's my daughter too, because like the curfew thing, the job thing, yeah, but like relinquishing some of the like control, like I like the worry and those types of things, because they are in this world doing their own thing. Was there anything that you could give us glean a little bit from your counseling, a little free counseling you could give us on some of that?
Oh, wow. I don't know if it was anything specific, but um, my counselor, I would say a thing that I was feeling, and then she would kind of echo it back to me in, do you, I don't know, this sounds kind of simplistic, but like, do you think God expects you to do this thing? Or do you think that God looks at you differently if you don't do this thing? Um, that's a way oversimplification of 2 years of therapy, but yeah, just she was really good at giving me like specific things that I could do with my kids or talk about with my kids. Like if I was having a rough relationship, she would say, okay, well, what are the things that you have in common? Like, because maybe they didn't want to have deep conversation, but I wanted to stay connected to them. And so she would say, well, what are the things you do have in common? And I would list some. And she would say, well, then, send them a text about the thing, cooking, music, movies, history, whatever is my connector with each of the kids.
That sounds really simple to you, but that's really helpful, honestly. That actually is really helpful, because you don't think of those things when you're in it, and it's nice to have someone outside looking in to give you those reflections. So thank you for that.
How about giving us a snapshot into your day? What does your day look like at this point, without the kids in the house or fully there?
That changes from day to day. It changed drastically when COVID happened. It changes periodically when my husband injures himself and needs to be cared for lengthy periods of time, which is a thing in our house. I would say I'm not great at being like on a schedule per se. I'm definitely not a morning person, but I make to-do lists and I use that to kind of organize myself for the day, but then I don't beat myself up at the end of the day if I didn't do everything on the to-do list. So I try to think about and be intentional about, some time with God, even if it's just like a little meditation in the car or something. Be intentional about making sure that my husband feels encouraged and loved, because you don't want to just give it away outside the house and then not have it in the house. And making sure that I'm connecting with people. Like, how can I be a good friend to people? And I feel like I pray about that, and that God puts people in my path to have conversations with, who like that people aren't really good at calling each other on the phone and saying, hey, let's get together and do a thing. We're really good at like being in a group of people and saying, we should have you over sometime, or we should do this thing together sometime, but then not actually doing it. And so I tried to do that. And so that takes up some time in my day as well. And then, Jen, as recovering from my own injury recently, that changed my schedule. COVID changed my day because my husband used to travel a lot, and he worked outside the office. He worked in an office, and then all of a sudden he started working at home, and we were spending more time together than we ever had in our entire married lives. So it was a little bit of a challenge. So finding a routine around him and me, and yeah, it sounds like I'm very disorganized, and I am, but I do get things done. And also I don't like to use the word struggle, but I have a depression that I manage. And so sometimes when that's not going great, just even checking things off the to-do list is like a little victory every time.
I have a few questions from that. One is, you said you intentionally think about how you can encourage your husband. And
Yes.
so could you get a little practical with that? Like, what does that look like, as you kind of think about that on a day-to-day basis?
Well, when he worked in an office, it used to include, when he would come home at the end of the day, no matter what I was doing, I would stop what I was doing and give him my full attention just for like 5 minutes, give him a kiss, welcome him home. Um, then we started this. He read some article about like men who kiss their wives before they go to work earn more money in their lifetime or some ridiculous thing. It's completely not provable. So he started making a joke of that. So he'd give me a kiss on the way out every morning. So now that he works at home, um, when he's in his office and I come downstairs to grab some breakfast or whatever, I make my way into his office and give him a good morning kiss and encourage him. I ask him if there's things I can do specifically for him. And I try to prioritize the things on the to-do list that are important to him if he expresses it. Like I don't like I'll ask him, is this a thing that can wait or is this a thing that's important? And sometimes he'll come up and say, he's free to say, this is can you like move your other stuff aside and do this thing? It's really important to me. And so responding to each other in that way, listening to each other and not assuming we know what's going on inside each other's head. So we try very hard to express what we are feeling or what we need to each other. And through that, I try to just give him like attention and make him feel loved. He's the most important person in my life.
I love all of that. And we've had episodes about our challenge as the three wives of us of making intention to pay attention to our husbands when they walk through the door. And so to see that you've done that for years is really encouraging for us to keep trying, keep trying to make that a priority.
Jan, how do you find contentment in this season? And I ask that because I don't know if it's just the culture, or the generation that we're in now, where I know sometimes personally for me, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or what I am doing doesn't matter, and so how do you find contentment? You've shared about what your day looks like. And to some people, that is like, oh, she's not doing anything. If you're not, you know what I'm saying? And that's, you kind of feel like if I'm not if I'm not a boss, if I'm not contributing financial income to the household, it's almost as if we put our value and our identity in what we do. So we live discontent, torn into pieces in a so to speak. So how do you find contentment in what the Lord has called you to do in this season?
I've been tackling that question since I stopped working full time because really I was raised in a generation of bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan. No lie. And even when I got married, my mom, who did work outside the home once I turned like maybe 12 and had like a full career, she told me when I got married, I don't want you to have a marriage like your father and me. We're so Victorian. I was like, I don't even know what that means, um, but I did put a lot of worth in like my job and my career and the contributing thing and the doing things. And you're right. And so I think that I've wrestled with that for quite some time now. And I think learning to like figuring out what my passions are, what brings me joy, how to have quiet moments with God, and to value those things instead. Um, and again, not beating myself up at the end of the day if I don't get my to-do list done. I am very fortunate because I don't have kids to take care of, that I can do things like I love to hike in the woods. I'm a nemopphilist, which is a word that means I just like to commune with trees, basically. And so, like, I guess I just like, and sometimes I just sit on my back deck and I look out and I think, I just love being here. I have a lot of appreciation for the moments that I'm in, and I understand that I have a lot of privilege in that because of my age and because my husband was willing to work full time and let me take care of the kids and then ultimately take care of him.
I like that. And it's good to know that it's not just a cultural thing. Like even for you, that transition for you was a wrestling. And I asked that, and still for me, just being a stay-at-home mom now of a 4-year-old, I was taught just like you take care of yourself. I wanted to be a teacher when I was younger. And my mom was like, teachers don't make any money. You need to be a lawyer. You need to be an engineer. Like, go into something that's going to make some money. And so that's what I did. And so that's where I found my identity. And so that transition to now being at home, and it's like this unseen, it's like, I think we all have this desire to be seen and to be known, and for people to appreciate what we do and to praise us for what we do. And at home, I wasn't getting a lot of, and nobody was seeing what I was doing. I'm like, social media doesn't see everything I'm doing over here. But when I was in the world, I was like, oh, I could, kind of brag a little bit. But we are to listen to God and not man. It's like nobody's voice should be louder than God's voice. And so it takes that, I believe, getting quiet and this quiet obedience to however loud the world is, to drown that out and just get, within yourself, this relationship that we have with Christ internally, and do that. Whatever that looks like our job is to bring glory and honor to God. And so we do that in trusting him and saying, God, I'm wrestling with this. I think I want that thing over here, but I'm going to die to my flesh and do what you've called me to do, even if it's not glamorous, even if it's behind the scenes. So I applaud your obedience in that. I know that's a deep wrestling, and to just, find this place of, it's enough. So thank you.
And it's a different paradigm than the world. That's what I've figured out. The other day I was meditating on Matthew, where Jesus says to not worry about, tomorrow, because today has enough worry of its own. But if you back up one scripture from that, he kind of gives us a recipe for that, which is to seek his kingdom first and his righteousness. And if you actually line your life up with that, it doesn't look like a career necessarily. It doesn't look like, getting lauded from the world. It doesn't, it is really like, I think that's another thing I've learned as I've aged is what we're called to is, it's just insanely different. And I don't think we really appreciate that always, that it is like, I remember, I want to say maybe 10 or some years ago, I thought the best victory I could have would be to go to a high school reunion. And when people say, tell me about yourself, the first thing that comes out of my mouth isn't like listing the stuff that I did or telling them about my kids, or at this age, talking about our aches and pains, but to say, like, to be able to describe my life in a way that shows that I'm God's daughter. I then that reunion got canceled, but but I thought that would be a great victory. Like, that was what I was working toward, like defining myself not by all those things, but by, like, what does it mean to seek his kingdom first and seek his righteousness? It doesn't necessarily mean what I've been taught all these years or whatever. Also helped that I went off Facebook. I went off Facebook a few years ago, and that helped a lot too. I didn't have like that envy thing, but it did help me get other voices out of my head and listen. My not watchword of the year, usually I have some kind of like a spiritual thing that I'm working on, but actually this year it is the song "The Voice of Truth" by Casting Crowns. And just I play it over and over, like, the voice of truth. That's the thing that needs to be in my head. What's the voice of truth?
That's good. That is so, oh my goodness, that is so good, because I was just sitting on the plane next to a young lady the other day, and I was telling her it's such a challenge to live in the world and not be of the world. And so I think, because the world is so loud, it's kind of hard to, because as you were saying, like when Jesus came, it's like he's saying the kingdom is here. Like the kingdom is here. It's not here in its fullness, but it's here. But our mindset is not often on the spiritual reality of the kingdom being here. And so we have this, like you were saying, there's this worldly paradigm. But if we can start to reframe the conversation, like you were saying, hey, I'm going to go to this high school reunion, And my answer is going to be spiritual. My answer is not going to be this, what we see worldly, what I do, but who I am at my core. And, that's what God has told us forever, like starting back in Deuteronomy, like talk about these things, keep my word forever on your lips. And when you go in, when you come out, teach it to your kids. But how often in the conversations that we have that it's not evident, or it's not in the relation of the truth that the kingdom is here, Jesus is the king, and we have a spiritual reality. So it's like, Lord, may the spiritual, the truth be louder. May that be what we see and not the world. And we have a role to play in that.
All right, Jan. So last question. What do you know now? As a Titus women, right? We've been doing a series of Titus about the older women teaching the younger women. So what would be the top 1, 2, or 3 things maybe that you haven't said today that you think are really important that you've learned that you want to leave for the younger women to ponder on?
Put your heart into your relationship with your husband, if you have one. Put your heart into and intentionality into relationships with other people, particularly other women. I was a tomboy. I was never really good at having girlfriends, as so to speak. But I've really worked on that over the years, and just being intentional about building friendships and keeping friendships. That's number 2. And number 3, honestly, still making sure my kids know that I love them would be a thing. And if the kids are still at home, like if you're kind of on the cusp of empty nesting, it's not too late to go find something fun to do with them. I years and years ago, we were someplace on vacation, and my oldest at the time was maybe 7 years old, and she was just being awful. And I just wanted to tear my hair out. And I called a friend of mine. I said, I feel like I hate her, which is a terrible thing to say. And my friend said, well, you need to go do something fun with her. And I was like, I can't even be in the same room with her. And she said, no, put her in the car and go do something fun with her. And so I prayed a lot. I forced myself to do that. She didn't want to go either, but we both still remember it as a pivotal turn in our relationship of what my younger daughter likes to call filling up your love bank. And so just making sure that your adult children still know that you love them and that you value them and their uniqueness, whatever that is, even during really tough times, saying nice things to them.
That was so good,
Okay.
honestly, because me and my oldest, we struggle, I think, because we're very similar in personalities. And so thank you for that. That was really encouraging for me alone. So I'm sure someone else will be encouraged by it too.
So awesome. Thank you, Jan. Thank you for spending some time with us to just talk about this stage, this season of life of empty nesting and the things you've learned about being intentional with your husband. I definitely like that kiss in the morning and kiss in the afternoon, and the wrestling. It sounds like from the things you've said, you've taken time to really wrestle, and it doesn't end. And really taking out the voice of the world and hearing the voice of God, whether it be amongst the trees or on your back porch. So we pray, you guys, that this episode has blessed you and that you are encouraged or can take something from this, even in your season of life now, and continuing to prepare as this wisdom keeps coming of paying attention to our husbands, giving them that preference. And so we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. And go ahead over to the Ardent Wives Club for exclusive, for conversation, for encouragement. And we'll see you next time. And we hope that we will be able to cry, laugh, and grow closer to Jesus. And we'll see you next time.